Welcome to a special episode with. I'm gonna try not to butcher your last name, Ron. So do give me your apologies. Witkowski. I'm just doing a check to make sure that we're live, and I see that we are inside the group. Also over on YouTube and also on my personal profile. So, without further ado, I'm going to welcome on Ron to share his story and to share his story with pain and limb pain. So, welcome onto the show, Ron.
Thank you for your time. A lot of people have asked me about nerve pain and pain stimulators. Pain stimulators can be used for nerve pain more than just for amputees. Um, Anybody going through nerve pain, that pain medicine do not work or nerve blocks don't work, the pain stimulators can also work. There is a stimulator called the DRG stimulator, and it's more localized to that the person is having.
Why has it worked more specifically with you, Ron, in terms of going down the route of a pain stimulator as opposed to what you forementioned?
So I didn't want to be on pain medicine the rest of my life and be addicted and to something that wasn't really working. So I went on and found out about pain stimulators, and I got what's called spinal cord stimulator, and it was work time, and then pain got worse, and then another doctor told me about what's called a DRG stimulator, and this works more localized to the pain, and it's just it's a better option for people. It but it may not work for everybody.
Okay. Oops, hit the wrong button then. What have you seen from a pain standpoint for you specifically from going from the one that was implanted next to your spine to the DRG? Has it been like night and day?
Yes, the spinal cord stimulator wasn't working. It stopped working for me. I got what's called the DRG implanted, and with that was 3 months ago, and I haven't had any pain medicine since.
Well, that's great news. And for people that are watching, Ron, how long have you had your amputation for?
Since 2016,
So we're going on 6 years. So how long after the amputation did you go down the spinal route with the pain stimulator?
it was about 4 years that I heard about the spinal cord stimulator, and so I decided to try it. And like I said, it took me off some of the medicine, but like,
You're talking like gabapentin and things like that, aren't you?
yes, it's kind of like a pacemaker, the size of a pacemaker that's implanted. And patients that have pacemakers can go on and get a spinal cord or a DRG stimulator, and it will not affect one or the other.
And whereabouts is your DRG located? Is it on the actual limb itself?
No, it's in my lower back.
Answer me. Answer me. I said answer me. I'm not going to take.
Sorry about that.
That's all right. It's a bit of comedic value in terms of the ringtone. Who's that ringtone for though?
Just anyone.
Is
It
that
says
so you
answer
make?
me. Yeah. It gets aggressive.
The only reason I ask you that, Ron, is obviously I've got one particular ringtone for family, albeit specifically I've got one for my mom, and then everybody else has obviously something else. So I know specifically, obviously it's more urgent and pressing call because it's obviously family.
I have a mom that her ringtone is actually, "It's your mother. Answer the phone."
Well, I think you need to have it because obviously there's so many out there in terms of I can't even remember the company that does it, but in terms of making it hyper specific for you as the user. But I don't want to detract from what we were talking about today too much. How much has the DRG, I'm going to use my words carefully now, improved your quality of life?
100%. Like I
What
can get up and I can transfer from my wheelchair to a regular chair, or I can walk on my prosthesis without pain. Whereas before the DRG, I had all kinds of pain that I could not and walk. It was just too painful.
So when you refer to pain, Ron, do you mean more specifically like nerve pain, phantom pain, not the usual blisters, soreness, and I would call that like
So
acute.
I would have a lot of pain in my spine, my lower back, and the stump, residual and spanum.
And how long was that going on for, the pain? Is it throughout the 4 years that you before you went down the spinal route?
Yes, it would come and go off and on before I went through the spinal cord stimulator.
And you mentioned, Ron, that obviously it's the DRG more so has obviously made life a lot easier. What has it allowed you to do beyond, transferring, walking?
I can be in my wheelchair and I can travel in my wheelchair from one room to another, or I can get down on the floor and get back up without being in pain.
So before you went down the route of discovering obviously the DRG stimulator, were you trying to avoid doing those tasks and going on the floor?
Correct. I wouldn't be able to do any of those things because I would endure too much pain.
So what did it inhibit you from doing in terms of because of so people can obviously put into perspective and relate and into towards their own, I'm not gonna say story, their own journey. What was it stopping you from actually being able to do?
I couldn't do activities like get on the floor. I couldn't do normal day to day activities with pain,
So you having to resort
like the
to,
showering.
oh, that's
Go
not
ahead.
ideal at all. So were you very much what's the word I want to use? Reliant on other people to help you out.
Yes, I did rely on a lot of people, but I was not only a victim, I was a caregiver of my for 4 years,
Oh, that
and
was that not a
even
challenge?
even though I endured a lot of pain doing that, I did it out of love, And then it come to a point where it got to be too much, and my wife was too much trouble to take care of. So we put her in a hospital, and then she went into a nursing home for a better quality of life.
Was that not difficult for you as the husband then to relinquish some of that caregiving?
It was very, it was, I mean, of course, take care of your spouse because it's part of the vows, and not, but especially as a victim like me in a wheelchair, it's not easy to get around like, let alone take care of somebody else.
But since you've obviously gone down the route of the DRG, has it been you've taken a little bit back some of that control of being reliant on others?
Yes, right now I live in a group home where I have a caregiver, but I also pitch in and help do some chores around, like take out garbage. I might run to the store on my power chair, just different little things around the house.
And has it given you more of a said freedom to be able to be more reliant on yourself?
Yes, I didn't do a lot of those things before I got the DRG. After I got the DRG, it changed my quality of life a lot.
Describe in what ways?
So I wouldn't be able to like do the dishes and cook and clean an apartment without having pain. And then it's like turning a light switch on that I would be able to go into the kitchen and clean the kitchen up, do the dishes and cook and clean and paint.
So how did that make you feel, Ron? Because obviously you unlike me, you haven't had your impairment all your life. How does it make
Right.
you feel about your predicament, your circumstances of being not being able to do, the dishes, not being able to care for your spouse, and obviously that's
It
something
made
that
me
you took
feel
for
a
granted when you
lot
were
better.
able-bodied.
It made me feel a lot better about myself to be able to do those things for myself and for someone else that couldn't do them versus relying on someone.
So wasn't it not difficult to be able to go from having a full functioning body to losing your leg to now being in pain and not being able to do something obviously most people take for granted of doing the dishes, taking out the trash?
So I, in my wheelchair, I can take out the trash and do different things to help around the house without being. And yet, other people, for granted, oh, I'll just go walk to the bathroom and go to the bathroom or whatever, or do the dishes. They don't have to worry about transferring from one chair to another to go do that chore.
How difficult was it mentally to adjust for you specifically to kind of going from I've got two legs to now that going to the bathroom is a challenge, doing the dishes is a difficulty. How challenging
So
was that mentally?
when I got my first amputation done, I felt like my leg was still there when as I was laying in the hospital bed. And then I thought, I'm gonna pull the cover back and look. and sure enough, my leg was gone. And kind of emotional to see it gone, but I overcome it. And I used to drive after amputation, and I would put my wheelchair in the trunk of the car and hold the car and hop around to the driver's seat and go where I needed to go.
So for you, just hearing you talk, Ron, do you believe it wasn't as much as an ordeal as you'd possibly had expected, or did you just get up and get on with it?
I got up and went on with life. I didn't let it get me down. And can't stress that enough to other people. Keep thinking positive about your life and go on with happiness. Go on with the best quality of life you can.
What would you say to the people that are still struggling with that ordeal of haven't quite been able to glimpse that positive outcome of, obviously as being, the admin of the group and doing coaching for a living, I hear this probably more times than I would like, but obviously some people would would say, I'm not going to name names, I'm going to keep people's names
Yeah, no.
anonymous. And obviously, people will say to me, "Oh, my life's over now that I've lost an arm, I've lost a leg, maybe two, maybe being the quad." What would you say to those individuals that maybe, being positive is without well outside their realm of possibilities?
So when I got my first amputation done, I went to a doctor and asked for my leg to be cut off because it wasn't healing. My foot was turned. It just wasn't. I was in a lot of pain. He said, "Go home and talk to your wife about it and pray about it." And from there on, I knew he was the one I wanted to do it because he was spiritual about it and he really cared. And he helped me to wrap my head around the situation.
Do you think it obviously helps to have that person of obviously you use spirituality of trying to walk you through that journey versus I've had the opportunity to speak to people that have kind of been left in the bed to think it over and to oh gosh, I don't the existence is not ideal because they've got nothing to aspire to being able to progress. Do you think with your caregiver telling you to go away and think about it, speak to your wife, and having a more of a optimistic or hopeful expectation on the future puts you in a better place to obviously succeed versus obviously the gentleman in question being left to having the amputation and kind of left to his own devices?
So I had a lot of positive people around me. I was going to a good church that supported my decision to lose. And it really helped to have those people around me and physically. They just helped me. I made the best decision I could make because somewhere in the Bible it says if a limb is doing you wrong, you get rid of it. And I took that to heed and decided to lose part of my leg below the knee to varicose vein damage and blood clots.
And my question to you, Ron, I'm very intrigued. How long did you endure that pain before you elected to actually have it chopped off?
So I all throughout my younger years working in factories and stuff, my foot and leg would swell up like one balloon inside of another one. The inside was bigger and felt like the outside one was just staying the size, and it hurt. I can't explain the kind of pain I went through, but that went on
So
for
when
about
it,
20 years.
oh my god, that must be horrific. So when the doctor said obviously go away and think about it and talk it over, was it a massive relief to say, well, we're almost finally home and we're going to be able to do something about relieving some of this ordeal?
It was a big encouragement to for him to say what he said, and then after I lost part of my leg, I did a lot of the pain, but not all of it.
Does one part of you wish that it would have relieved all of the pain and suffering?
Of course, I wish all the pain was gone with losing a limb, but it didn't work that way. However, I had a neighbor that become an amputee, and she never endured any pain.
So what are those conversations like then? Because obviously most people, this is the other side of the Bible, jealousy, enviness, oh, Cain and Abel swings to mind. Of obviously you could be in a negative position of, oh, I wish I was her. Oh, she got it easy. Because obviously doesn't have to deal with any of the downsides of losing a limb.
So, yeah, I wish I was like her. The Bible says you're not supposed to be jealous of anyone because it's a sin. But I got through my pain and went on and did the procedures I did to take care of the pain.
Well, I praise you for obviously being the bigger man, because ultimately most people would resort to comparison and go down the route of, oh, I wish that I had this, I wish that I had that, I wish I was that other individual. And I don't want to use the word preach, but like to showcase to people that obviously that's the comparison is not ideal, because if you're not being able to be aware of how much it's eating away at you inside or internally, that's doing you a disservice. Whereas if you were to be in a position to, another word, probably emulate the individual and want to get on level par with them, obviously that's going to make you a better person, because obviously you want to get to a position where life's a bit easier. I know the example, if we use my story of the sporting one, I used able-bodied role models because the Paralympic movement was, well, minuscule in this country to what it is now in the present day, and obviously the US has still got some ways to go, because there wasn't anybody like me. So it was to kind of go, well, I want to emulate that. And why I say competition is good in that fashion is if you know the person, obviously you can use each other to kind of lift up each other. So that's why I asked you, Ron, in terms of, did you do you use your neighbor as, who ask you now, which do you find yourself, for the majority of the time, do you find yourself comparing yourself to her, or do you use each other to better each other by competing in the word sense?
So it wasn't a compete type thing. I just was really happy and excited for her that she didn't have to go through anything because she was an example for people that don't go through pain versus someone like myself that does go through pain.
So would you go down the route of, well, in one sentence, empowerment? Because obviously you're using empathy and compassion to embrace obviously her situation and not looking to belittle it in any way. So I'd say in one way, if you're performing, it is a sort of empowerment by obviously embracing and showcasing to others that it's a flip of a coin to some extent. Of some people will not get phantom limb pain, some people will, and obviously there's a spectrum somewhere in between.
Exactly. This woman did everything for herself. She was in a wheelchair, couldn't wear a prosthetic, but she would go in the kitchen and cook and clean, do everything for herself instead of having someone come in and
Well, that's the challenge for any new, um, I'm going to say returning amputee, somebody that's obviously had it for years, like is your case, is that stubbornness to some extent, reluctance to seek out help, to want to have somebody do something for yourself. It's a challenge because obviously we want to be in a position, and I'll put the whole community in one bubble now. It doesn't matter if it's limb difference, limb loss, amputation, elective, you lost it through trauma. Is we all have this thing within us that, oh, I don't need help. I need to show that to the rest of the world that I'm more than capable. But sometimes we need to relinquish some of that because it might be that the person's good-hearted. They want to be not be seen to aid somebody that is, I'm going to put loosely, invalid. They've got a kindred spirit that they, by helping you, me, other individuals, it is their highlight of their day. So if you retract that from them, hey, it's not. We're doing a disservice to that other individual because if that's their highlight of their day, helping you, me, somebody else, that's not ideal. I know it's challenging because we want to be seen to get on with life. We want to be seen to be resourceful. But hey, if that person wants to help you and you've been uplifting to their day, hey, maybe you need to a little bit. It's almost like a give and take. Sometimes you need to say no and say I'm more than capable of do. Obviously, in a more polite and diplomatic way than I've just delivered that. But sometimes, hey, if that's going to help the other individual and that's been, I don't know, it could be a simple gesture. How you doing today? That could have a massive impact on that person's day just by that interaction.
so back when I got my first amputation done, I was reluctant to let people help me by opening a door or whatever, or maybe get my chair out of the car for me. And then I thought, they're missing out on a blessing by helping someone else. So I began to let other people do stuff for me. And I think that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, it's difficult. Obviously, we're two men, grown men. I'm not saying women don't do this as well, but
Right.
we are, very thick-skinned, almost like Neanderthals. Of no, no, no. I've got to show some sort of masculinity that I'm more than capable. I'm going to use Jeanette's aspect of independence. Of the male dominance is even worse because it's like, well, I can't be seen to be seeking help because that's going to be stigmatized as weakness. This is obviously we're closing in obviously only about 5 days away from May, which is Mental Health Month, Awareness Month. This needs to stop because ultimately, if we're not in a position as males to be able to ask for help, seek support from our male counterparts, women don't have a problem with communicating this. Of okay, they might loosely want independence, but they have no problem talking within their social clique or their particular group of friends about problems. Where men, maybe not so much.
So I think it's a sense of pride. We, as men, we have a sense of pride that we don't barrier that we don't want to let down that and say, "Hey, will you help me? Will you get me a cup of coffee? Will you get this for me or that?" I have a housemate here that helps me a lot and just gives him a sense of importance. And I think that's important for people.
Well, it's recognizing in sense of well, what is pride? What is acceptance? It's these are words at the end of the day. Pride about what? Uh, pride that somebody getting you a cup of coffee is tiny. It's not going to. And obviously, Jeanette's put. Obviously, women think the same way. That I could let go viral and let people discuss about that because there's going to be obviously people going to have different opinions in terms of some men will agree with that, some women will disagree with that opinion. But coming back to the point about pride, Ron, is a perspective on it because obviously I did a post about that on last week about I'd lost my pride about my disability it shocks able-bodied people when I say it in terms of I want to be anything but disabled. Everybody watching this who's got an impairment feels the exact same way. It doesn't matter at what stage they've acquired it, they're going to have that feeling that circulates around their brain in terms of I would rather have the alternative of what was. Obviously, I've got nothing to compare about against. I just wanted to be like any other kid. I wanted to be, I'm going to say normal, but just fit in. Whereas the element of pride of what have you got? What point have you got to prove to anybody else? This is probably where the older you get, this narrative or the aspect of pride goes out the window because people don't care. You no longer care what people think about you. So the aspect of pride is oh, it's a hot topic because obviously we could go into that in greater detail and talk about it for ages because everybody's got a different perspective on what it looks like, what it is. I've got two aspects of it, maybe even more than that. Be it, being somebody of that's got an impairment, somebody of mixed race, obviously my sporting background, the list is endless. My family being in the military, the pride aspect is a challenge. But if we come back to you, Ron, of the aspect of somebody getting you a coffee, that's your male aspect come into play because you don't want to be seen somebody helping you out, which is machismo and it's also an ego.
So somebody with two legs that can get up and walk to the coffee pot and get a cup of coffee doesn't think anything about it. Whereas for me, if I'm sitting in a regular chair and have to transfer and then grab the coffee cup and go, it's different. So maybe it's insecurity that we don't want to ask for that help.
But is that wrong? Because if
Right.
I went a step further than that and said to the able-bodied individual, "Have you got any insecurities?" If they said no, I know that's not true because there isn't there isn't any factor that anybody doesn't have insecurity. It doesn't matter if it's about their disability, their weight, their gender, you name it. The list is pretty much endless. And for the able-bodied person to say that they don't have insecurities, it's not true. Because if I were to take them out of their comfort zone of, hey, you're telling me you can get up and walk and go to the coffee pot, let me make it more difficult. You need to jump in this chair, or you need to use a set of
Walk a
crutches.
step
It's
in
going to
my
be
shoe.
hard.
Walk a step in my shoe and see how I go through life getting in a wheelchair or on crutches or walker to get that coffee or that sandwich or whatever it might be.
You're gonna get a few. You're gonna get multiple answers. You're gonna get, no, I'm not doing it. You're gonna get obviously the ones that will embrace a challenge because it's like, well, be it occupational therapist, physical therapist. I want to be able to relate to my patient as what they have to do or endure on a daily basis. Let me maybe do it for half an hour, and then I can see how challenging it is. Obviously, me going in a wheelchair, I had to play a wheelchair sport. For me, it's not something that I've got insecurities about because, hey, it's a vehicle that allows me to partake in the sport. Other people, and I know the individuals, but I won't name them, have been basketball players when they were able-bodied, have and they see the wheelchair as making them more disabled than they are by having just a prosthetic leg. That is insecurity, but it is a challenge to be able to showcase to. I'm going to use one of my clients. I'm going to give you a shout out, Colin. He calls them normies. That's hilarious. But in terms of not normies, no, sorry, it's Aiden Mutley. It's normies. For them, obviously, life is not as simple as we portray it as. You've got all your working limbs, thus you don't have any struggles with. So for somebody to say to me they don't have a disability, I would turn the other cheek because that's not true. It doesn't matter if it's an insecurity. It doesn't matter if it is. Obviously, we're getting to a
Like,
point with the pandemic of people have anxiety issues, depression. That is a debilitating issue because it's going to stop you from doing things that you want to do because it's going to affect your confidence. So for people to, I'm going to use what Jeanette's put underneath, to accept your journey as a person with a disability, everybody in society needs to do that. And the better we become as a community to be able to not necessarily embrace the disability, but kind of showcase, we can laugh about it, we can discuss about it, and normalize, the difficulties as well as the exploits of success. Everybody benefits because you normalize every aspect of that journey for everybody. As okay, the difficulties are a challenge. I'm not disputing that. Everybody's different with
right,
how they come to terms with a new lifestyle, which it is in effect. But if we normalize that to everybody, and we can laugh about, the upheaval, and obviously that takes a lot of confidence to be able to do that. I'm not disputing that because if you're not comfortable, confident with your current circumstance, you're not going to talk about it. You're not going to showcase it, and you're sure as hell not going to laugh about it. So it is one of those challenges that I'm going to struggle keeping up with those messages, Jeanette. But obviously, it's taking the aspect and obviously reflecting on. Obviously, we've evolved from pride to the aspect of, and I've lost my train of thought with that. We've gone from what we were talking about pride to a little bit more, a deeper level of insecurity, which obviously males don't want to showcase insecurities. Jeanette would say that women don't want to show insecurities, but until you become comfortable with vulnerability, which obviously I've done to a greater degree because nobody could relate to me within the amputee community from my sporting background, because people will put me on a pedestal. I didn't put myself there, so I tried to um, shorten the chasm of the disconnect of what do I need to do to be more relatable to the ordinary person in the street. I had to become more vulnerable. So I've shared things that have shocked people, have brought people to tears. I'm just telling facts. This is what happened here, here, here. I'm comfortable with it, and obviously it's a confidence to be able to showcase to others from an empowerment standpoint of, hey, you can be anywhere in your life, but you can improve that situation.
So, in the beginning of that part, you said something about handicap can be different forms, not always physical. That said, I grew up mentally handicapped. I was a slow learner in school. So that's an example of handicap being different forms. It's not always something you can see. And then you said about having a sense of humor and laughing about the amputation. At one point, my neighbor on Halloween said, "Tell my boys how you lost your leg," and I laugh about it. A mean doctor with a chainsaw cut it off, and people just cut up laughing about it, and I laugh about it too.
Well, I think you can have fun with kids because ultimately you can use your imagination and use the chainsaw aspect. I got a great story. I did that with an adult because he was saying, and this is somebody within the fitness industry. I'm not going to name the person because that'd be harsh. But in terms of what he was saying to me is, James, you've got it easy because the relatable factor of if you put out just a picture, you can relate to the audience. Like, yeah, okay, that's the positive side of it. But obviously, everybody, whether or not you laugh at this or you don't, I I can't do it with a stern face today, but that particular day, I said, "Oh, let's go in the back garden, let's chop yours off." And if you can relate for the negative, because I can obviously attest to the downsides of we talked about initially at the beginning of the show about blisters, pressure sourcing, that I endure those not daily, but they're going to be more of a problem as we move into the summer. But I can relate to the bad, the nitty gritty of living as life without a leg. An able-bodied person doesn't look at all the facts. I obviously kind of went, well, okay, let's give you a reality check. You're looking at the pros of just putting an image out. Yes, I agree. Yes, it is a lot easier than having to do your homework and really getting to know the audience. It does give me an upper hand to some extent, but I do want to get to know in each every person that I come across has got a limb difference or limb loss because everybody is different. The journey is different. The the way in which the limb has been lost different. Maybe the result that everybody wants, and I'm going to just use weight loss as an example, might be all the same, that you want to lose a certain put X number of pounds, the same, but your A to B, be it Ron, Jeanette, I apologize, I'm going to use Facebook user, I'm going to have to look on my phone who it is going to be very, very different. And obviously, to just say using a picture gives you the upper hand, it's like, well, that's not the case. I've got the relatability also of the bad. You're looking at the good, I live the bad. And to not embrace that as well does an injustice to everybody, because that's what the vulnerability is, that's the adversity, that's what everybody is facing on a day-to-day basis. We all downplay it to some degree because it's our lives of, okay, me overcoming the issues around not having my leg on display as a teenager. To me, that's minuscule as adversity. But for other people listening, watching, and probably more so the able-bodied community, for them it's like, oh, that's a massive overcoming of a hurdle. It's like, well, not really. Okay, it took an amputee showcasing to me that, hey, as a teenager, that you've got enough battles as it is, let alone having to overcome that as well. It is adversity. Okay, I'll own it. But it's embracing that vulnerability and being, showcasing every emotional attachment that goes along with it, be it, happiness. We'll do it quite easily on Facebook from a sadness perspective because there is a lot of, pray for me and things like that. But showcasing, we have a wicked sense of humor as a community. It's quite
Different.
darkish at times. It's
Yeah.
to showcase that to the P. Okay, we don't need to be too PC. You can say things to certain individuals, and there will be no offense taken. Obviously, some people will be the other end of the spectrum and will take, oh, you can't say that because you're not one of us. It's trying to accommodate yourself to be, hey, I can be inside the joke with Jim. I'm not poking fun at him. I'm not poking fun at Ron. I'm a part of the joke. Obviously, it takes us to do that, to showcase that we're comfortable with it. Okay, I used one comment about a year and a half ago because my business coach is able-bodied, but he's ex-military, so he's very much women and children first, and then the men second. So I came out with a comment: "I shouldn't be the cripple, be next." I didn't think twice about the comment. I did probably think about it a little bit, but it's quite controversial as a comment because technically we should be the next in line because we are be seen maybe a little bit weaker than, and I'm using a stereotype like ancient history of maybe the Spartans of chucking kids. If they're not perfect, we chuck them over a cliff. But he wanted me to take the statement back. I can't take a statement back once it's come out of my mouth. I've said it. It shocked people, but you've known me long enough that that's tame. It is. It's gonna make people sit up and take notice as this person, oof, takes no prisoners. But obviously, I saw the funny side of it as because it to me that is it should be it's funny because I should be the next up. If you wanna take that as not, hey, that's fine. Yeah, maybe I need to tame it down a little bit, but it's trying to find where exactly the nail's gonna hit the mark. It's trying to find what you can and can't say, and be able to showcase to, as long as you don't go to the extreme, and I'm talking about able-bodied, you shouldn't have a problem because you just normalize that I'm comfortable to make fun and poke fun in myself.
I agree with that. For the longest time, let me back up. 4 years ago, I lost the second part of my leg above the knee to osteomyelitis. But I have fun with saying 2.5, 3 years ago, I was in a bad accident where a young man turned out in front of me and I T-boned his truck. And I got out of the van on my walker and said, "Look, I lost part of my leg in the accident." And that poor young man, I felt bad because I said that. He was laying on the floor, didn't know what to do.
How did how I can't even get my words out. What position did that put you in to be not be able to be helpful in some way, shape, or form, though?
After being in the accident.
Mm.
So I lost my license to drive, and I chose not to get my license back because the fear and the responsibility of driving. I don't, and the expense. I just don't want all that burden on my life anymore because I have friends and people that can take me places I need to go somewhere, and they get their blessing by helping me.
Do you feel a sense of how would I describe this? By relinquishing your license and not driving anymore, do you think that it's gonna let me backtrack a little bit. Do you think that might have happened again in the future if you hadn't given up the license and stopped driving in the back of your mind?
Looking back, if I were to endure this again and go through losing my license, I don't think I would do it any differently. I think I would just let other people take me places instead of trying to drive and have the expense and everything.
I'm not going to share Jeanette's one because it's controversial. Because obviously that's your circumstance. Um, because obviously you have a sense of regret of being in that accident in the first place. I know Jeanette's saying should never give up
I have a
independence.
sense of regret. I regret the fact that it was a nice van that I had. It was like brand new, even though it was used. It was solid. It was a good handling van. And then all of a sudden crash and it comes to an end. But I'm very happy that God brought my wife and I through that accident with little to no scratches. And her finger was dislocated in the accident. And that was the only damage that really happened.
It's a challenge in terms of coming to terms, and I probably would agree with Jeanette to some extent. Once you have the ability to drive, uh, disability or not, obviously you get to a certain. I'm not going to say what age group, but be it you learn to drive in the US, you gain your independence, so you wouldn't want to relinquish that for anything. It's interesting that you've got a good support network that's I'm not gonna say willing to take you everywhere, but they're willing to aid you to do things that you want to do. So that's hard to come by in some circumstances, especially in adulthood, because people will probably use that against you. Of well, why can't you take yourself? And Jeanette said, never give up attitude of in terms of why can't you do it yourself, but being in an accident obviously going to change things. The perspective on the way you view things, and obviously it's going to make you change the decisions you have going forward because of past things that you've I won't say past mistakes, but past decisions you made are obviously going to make dividends in the future.
So again, I wouldn't change anything. Most people at older age, when they can't physically or mentally drive, they fight to give up that right to drive. I chose at a younger age to go ahead and give it up rather than cause trouble for someone else and myself.
Well, that's like the narrative of jump before you're pushed. It's like retirement, more so in sport than to do with a career. Of you want to make the decision that's best for you and the best that's around you. Most people don't do this. I happen to be one of the people that jumped or walked away before I was pushed, and that's why I don't like people that you could say hang on almost to the better end, and it's at the detriment of other people. Because it's like, well, you should retire and give somebody else an opportunity to be in the spotlight, and for you to share that from a mobility standpoint, that you rather do it for the betterment of others. Obviously, it's the safety of road. You've obviously got your own reasons for why you did it, but that is a challenge when it comes to, you could say, independence, mobility, and you're going to do your utmost to not actually give that up. You're going to give it. You're not going to give it up without a fight. And obviously, for you to do the opposite and relinquish it, take some come on, I'm going to use a Spanish term, the cojones. The ball to do that. To that, I'm going to be okay on the other side, in spite not being able to drive myself, not being able the opportunity to pick up my keys and just go. I think we've obviously become conditioned to point that once we have the ability to drive, I'm not going to give that up for anybody, because it's that ability that any given moment, be it to improve um, my mental well-being, just clear my head, I can just get up and go. And obviously, you've got to be able to recondition that in a different way to be able to have the same outcome. So for me, I nod my cap to you for doing that, because that's not something easy to do.
It's easy for people to adapt to a different way of doing things. And I just chose to adapt to a different way of getting around and let other people do it for me and get a blessing than to take myself places and deny somebody else of a blessing.
Do you believe that being spiritual, religious has helped you, because obviously you see it maybe differently to say maybe somebody that's less religious or maybe atheist, that kind of sees it as black and white. As
I think
why would I
100% the the
go on? Go
religion
on.
the religion helped me to get through the obstacle or storm, as I sometimes call it, of being an amputee and a new way of life. Having all that spiritual support around me helped out a lot.
I can't find what I was looking for. Is a quote that would have been nice to go with what you've just said. It's a Navy quote. I'm gonna paraphrase it a little bit, but it's you talked about persevering through a storm. It's U.S. Navy one, and the perspective of holding strong and telling somebody to, obviously the one at the helm, to stay the course. Of it's having a strong will that everything's going to be all right, in spite of being in the thick of the adversity. So be the eye of the storm. So be it. Okay, for the Floridians and the East Coast, you'll know what a hurricane is. I've not had to live through one of those. But in terms of it's having the faith that it's going to get better. It might be tomorrow. It might be next week. It might be next year. It might be 5 years
I
time. But
agree with that.
it's persevering with what you're doing, and the
A
lightness,
challenge.
the brightness is going to get obviously clearer and clearer. It's almost like a dark tunnel. There is light at the end of the tunnel. It's just you might not particularly be able to see it right now, but that dot's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Obviously, then it'll be right staring you in the face. But it's having religion, it's having belief, it's having hope, it's having, as I mentioned,
Support system.
perseverance. It's just,
The support system.
well, that helps, but obviously the better that you get at it, being able to be your own support system, you're reliant on two outlets. I'm not going to say one versus the other because that won't support what I'm going to say. But if you are able to problem solve firsthand, you can kind of say, well, this is the problem. Here is a solution. Go with it. Obviously, I'll put Jeanette. What put you put? Motivation and determination. What keeps me going? Knowing God is helping me to help others. So motivation, determination, aspiration. Obviously, the list is endless in terms of using something when the chips are against you. Is finding that beacon of hope. So be it could be a podcast, it could be YouTube, it could be Facebook Live, it could be quotes, it could be, the list is so endless in terms of lifting yourself up. But at the end of the day, nothing can change without you actually doing it. The support network can support you, but they can't do it for you. That's the challenge of a support network is able to motivate you. It can give you feedback, but at the end of the day, you've still got to do the work.
So that said, I often tell my therapist when he comes to walk a step in my shoe, meaning try putting on my prosthesis and walking on my prosthesis. And he looks at me and says, I can only imagine what that feels like. I'll never be able to. A person that does not have an amputation obviously can't put on that prosthesis and see what we go through, the pain and the uncomfortableness of putting on that limb to try to walk around and go through life.
They can to some extent. The physical things of the therapist could use a desk chair and put the leg on one end, try walk with it. It'd be funny if they fell over, but that aside, but in terms of the pain aspect of what you're talking about, no, they can't relate to. That's the challenge with partners, spouses, children. They can't relate to what the person is having to deal with because you can't bring into how am I gonna verbalize this. You can't realize the pain that they're going through physically. I'm not gonna say emotionally. You probably can if you're an empathetic person that's willing to listen, because that's obviously God gave us two ears and one mouth for a reason. It's to
Right.
be quiet and listen to the other person. But sometimes you learn more by listening to the other individual. Let that person talk out what they've got going on, and obviously by doing that, that person can verbalize what they've got going on in their head. Of okay, is what I'm saying as big as I believe it to be? Obviously, if you speak it out and loud and you kind of go, well, no, exactly, it's not. You can actually start to problem solve as okay, well, how do I look to improve that situation? Whereas if it's still in your head, it's almost like the analogy of a black wolf, or you get lost in your mind and you start to actually make things, I'm not say worse than they actually are, but make it the scenario, situation, or circumstances bigger than they actually are to everybody else, which is a challenge.
I'm not sure how to comment on that one.
That's just a statement, but it's trying to. If I use the scenario of a document, if we make the things black and white very much in a fashion of numbers, that's logic. In terms of if this thing's telling me that, if I use a bit of fruit, an orange is orange, an apple is different colors. They're an object and they can't change. Whereas if we go into our emotions, that's where the trouble starts, because we start to attach certain emotions to events. So be it I've lost my leg, I could be sad, I could be angry, I could be frustrated, or obviously the flip of the coin of that is okay, I'm happy, I'm going to get on with my life. Those are emotional attachments to logic, as in terms of, instead of looking at a situation, I'm going to set the leg to one side a little bit and look at things in a numeric fashion, or the thing is a yes or no. It's very easy, because in terms of, if I've got a problem and I can only use a yes or no answer, I get to a solution very, very quickly, because it would be okay. If I go back to myself as the example of, not wearing shorts as a teenager, do I have a problem with it? Yes. What can I do about it? Change the circumstances. Boom. We go to A to B very, very quickly. Okay, that's not
Overcome.
very good. It's overcoming something that is a problem for you. Other people will say that's quite a thing of adversity. To me, that's 3 steps. I'll do it with my other hand. 3 steps, boom, A to B. As a teenager, because I had a problem with it. Okay, some things going from A to B, from problem to solution, may take longer, but if you can kind of go simplify it, okay, I'm making it seem so easy. But if it's a yes or no answer, you're not trying to prove something. You're not trying to make things more complicated than they sometimes need to be, because it will be, okay, this is the problem. My answer is a yes or no. It is a problem or it isn't. Okay, we go to the next step. Can I control it or can I not? That's a little bit more difficult. But in terms of being able to control the controllables, and we come back to this epiphany moment that I had when somebody showcased this, in terms of looking at things of from, we'll use it in with marketing, leads and lags. Leads is very much looking at weight loss as calories, or how much calories you're intaking, exercise, etc. You can control that. You have very much the power to put your stamp on it, versus the result that I want to achieve. You have no control over that because of, external factors, stress, uh, life hacks. The list is endless. So to be able to distinguish between the two and the yes or no, you get from problem A to solution B or solution C a lot quicker than if we get to a point where we get stuck in our head. So be it, pain is a prominent one, because we get to a point where, where am I going to go with it? The pain consumes us, and ultimately only our pain exists. Nothing outside of that is a focus, because we're entrenched in that narrative, because we're living it. It could be hundreds, thousands of people going through the same ordeal. I don't know, Ron, my pain's worse than yours. James, my pain's worse than yours. But if we were able to take that backward step and kind of go, okay, this is the mindset thing, when it comes to it, of being able to look at the bigger picture. Okay, Ron's going through the same thing as me. Let me reach out to him and talk about it, and then we might come to a position where we help each other out, because I might be able to give you a hack that's gonna help you with the pain. You might be able to give me a hack that's gonna help me with what I'm going through, and we obviously lift each other up out of a difficult situation.
I feel like you're talking about identity, and through my younger years, I grew up with all my limbs and was able to get around like a quote normal person. And then later on in life, was unfortunate and lost a part of my limb. And tell people, don't let that stop you from doing anything that you want to do. Life doesn't end because you're in a wheelchair or because you have to use a walker or crutches. Go on and make the best of your life. I also want to
Well,
say
that's
that I went through another identity change. For 36 years, I hid behind um, an identity that wasn't appropriate for me to live through my marriage. And now that I'm going through a divorce, I've changed that and an identity and a different person now.
well, you raised a good point there, Ron, because obviously identity is a challenge. Because for me, being them difference, I already have an identity when I'm a couple months old. It's I'm missing a leg. I'm going to wear a prosthetic for the rest of my life. That's my identity. I'm probably fortunate that my support network was very strong from a young age. I had a great support network. That was my family, coaches, and things like that, to kind of showcase that the world is your oyster. I'm lucky that where I grew up was very beneficial of that. But and I appreciate you sharing your identity shift that you had to make. But it's embracing the identity that you want to become, which is scary, and it's a willingness to cut off the head of the identity that's not serving you anymore. For me, that was a very difficult challenge, and I'm still going back into that identity as a sportsman from time to time, because obviously some of that is still useful, but some of that stuff doesn't serve me, doesn't serve the community, because it's a different environment altogether. It's not one that's I don't need to go to war with each every one of you. I shouldn't laugh with that. But in terms of, be it every conversation is not a war, every dialogue is not a competition that needs to be won. I don't have to get one over on you to make myself feel better about myself. But it's a challenge when you're trying to cultivate this new identity that you wanna form, because it's you don't know if you whether or not you can step into those shoes. You don't know if you can succeed because of past failures. And what I say to everybody watching is, in terms of, well, where you're at now, you're in a limbo anyway. So why not have that leap of faith, or prove it to yourself. I'm going to put a word in there as well, that you can achieve it. Okay, I'm going to use John. I'm going to put John G, because obviously I'm going to get his surname wrong, on YouTube. That's where a support can be for amputees, can help people through challenges. It's having the willingness to. I know we talked about reaching out for help. Don't always have to do that. It could be you can do it subtly and by asking questions indirectly to get what you want to be have answered. You don't always have to approach a coach, I'm not going to use influencer, an expert, or somebody with expertise directly. You can do it indirectly by obviously going in the chat and engaging, and obviously that will, how would I describe this, make the flow of the conversation potentially go where you want it to be answered, because obviously by contributing, it's going to enable me and Ron and other guests, myself, to be able to answer your questions, because you're making a conversation go in a way that's going to aid you. And obviously that's through obviously commenting, message. You could even obviously message one of us behind the scenes. Because so many different ways you can do it now, in the 21st century, to be able to get yourself in a position to succeed. Of you can do it with, as I mentioned, with what John said, with support groups. I wouldn't even try and guess how many there are on Facebook for amputee specific, limb loss. It's probably in, I don't know, it's in the two figures at least.
Yeah.
Using Google, I'm not just saying Google as a resource for finding information on the internet. Obviously, we've got Yahoo and things like that. YouTube, of putting in questions that you might want to have answered. I've been massively surprised at how useful YouTube is by asking questions, almost like Google, but secondary, but you get it in video format. Um, and it is obviously utilizing each other. Of if you don't know the answer, somebody might do. If I don't know the answer, obviously I'll go look or ask. If I don't know something, I might ask somebody within my network of, okay, I've been asked X, Y, Z. You're the expert. What's the answer? And then obviously give back. But as Jeanette mentioned, it's proving to yourself that you can do it. That obviously takes a lot of confidence, because if you're not in a position to believe that you can achieve because of, I'm going to use weight loss again, past failures, or a program that you've done before has let you down, and you don't have the conviction to have the onus and own it, that I'm going to be successful. That's confidence. That's conviction. That is a je ne sais quoi. It is a willingness, despite. And I'm gonna be honest here. I haven't got it always together in terms of, it might be the perception or the illusion that I put out that I have always got all my ducks in a row, or a domino effect. Not always like that. There are hardships that I face, but it's reminding myself through conversations, uh, be it like this podcasts, being lucky to be interviewed myself, to kind of go put things in perspective of, people do look up to you, and you have that perseverance to kind of go, okay, I'm going to put the middle finger up to myself and kind of go, that narrative's not helping me right now. It's holding me back. If I don't show up, I do a disservice to the group who's watching. I do a discredit to the community, and obviously, if I don't show up, people can't find me that don't know that I exist. So sometimes it's looking at self sabotage in a way that, okay, why am I creating hardship for myself? Why am I making things more difficult than they need to be? If I'm going to come back to the example of the weight loss, if I've got to lose X pounds, why am I going to make things more difficult by believing in, it's a mindset, and it also is some identity of, because if you've had so much failure over a certain point in time, you become that person. It's not a phrase, it's not a sentence. I believe I'm a failure. I've been there, and ultimately it's taken work over the years. I'm not talking that long ago. It's about 4 years ago, to rebuild that individual and rebuild that identity of. And I had to work in education at the time as well. I worked in high school, so that was even worse. But I had a student say to me, Mr. Roberts, your sporting career was not a success. Hang on a second. No, no, no. I no longer talk to myself like that. So you as another individual are not going to do that. But that takes a lot of work. That takes a lot of conviction to be able to be confident in the belief that you are 100% sure in your identity. So I commend you for reinventing yourself, post divorce, because that's another challenge. Because not only from a religious standpoint, but obviously other stigmas as well. You having, I don't want to use failed marriage, could be used against you as, oh, why didn't you make it? Why didn't you make it work? Why didn't you try and make arrangements so it could, like perseverance
We
of.
tried just about everything that we could to make it work, and she made it clear that she didn't want me in her life any longer. went to the nursing home to visit her, and she's like real snippy, short with me. Get out of the room, go on, just go, go, go. And so I just left the stuff they brought her and left. Didn't tell her I wanted a divorce. I called her brother and told him, and then he contacted her and told her. And we talked about identity conviction. After I decided I wanted this divorce, I made a real big, brave, and hard decision to come out of the closet, so to speak. And in this day and age, it was not easy. But I'm so much happier now than I have ever been.
Well, you were telling me behind the scenes of ultimately you've had other people when you've said that. Obviously, I wasn't going to judge you. I know enough people that are homosexual, be it male or female, that I'm not going to judge. Who am I to say that what is in your heart of hearts is wrong. It it was something that you disclosed behind the scenes. Hey, I'm not going to judge you for it. I think you were mightily surprised. It's like, well, hey, I've been brought up in such a way that people's differences. It doesn't matter. I think it's probably a blessing in disguise because I've grown up in an environment that's multicultural. I can't judge people based on their race, their nationality, the language that they speak. Because hey, if we can communicate and we can get on, uh, it probably helped that I was a child because you're not going to hold grudges. You're going to kind of go, well, I like you based on probably
The person I am.
the person that you are, and anything else is not really. Well, I'm not going to, the this is irrelevant, but the size of your house, the car that you drive as a child. Hey, those are materialistic things that haven't presented themselves yet. So I'm just going to base it on, do I like you? Yes or no, and that's it. Whereas it's probably the societal bias. As the older we get, we're going to be influenced to make different decisions, and ultimately, we're going to, for the majority, we're going to deviate from the course that we once had as children, and we're going to be, I'm not going to say petty, but we're going to look at material things that we can judge you on. Of okay, you're not straight. Why? Why don't you have a flashy car? Why are you not working? The list, I could be here all day. But in terms, I'm gonna use anything to make the divide greater. So for you to come out and say, okay, James, I'm no longer heterosexual. Hey, I'm not gonna judge you for that. It's as long as there's no foul, no harm, as we discussed, on Messenger. Hey, I'm gonna judge you for Ron. We've had good conversation. Um, you've been
I will
very.
never bring my sexuality into a person that does not want it. Does that make sense?
Yep, that makes it. Well, that's how it. That should how it should be it homosexual, heterosexual,
Right,
transgender. It's
right, right,
being comfortable. I don't want to judge now. It's being comfortable in your skin, and being. There's going to be people that don't like you, irrespective of how hard you try. That's not going to change. Doesn't matter what. You could be green polka dots, bright purple. People still not going to
right.
like you. You
Whether
don't.
we're Mexican from the Ukraine or whatever, or United, wherever we're from, we all bleed red.
So we are coming to a close, Ron, to today's live interview. It's been my absolute pleasure to have you on, and I really appreciate you sharing your story and being very vulnerable and open and sharing with us today. And probably people would probably agree with that in the comments.
Okay, I want to say thanks for your time. And I brought up my identity because there's other people out there that might be going through an identity crisis and don't know how to bring it out. And maybe that'll help them be encouraged to bring out their um, identity and the way they feel about people.
Well, it's been my I hit the wrong button again. It's been my absolute pleasure.
Thank
And
you.
obviously, as Jeanette can attest to, she really appreciated it and enjoyed the episode. So it's been my absolute
Thank
pleasure having you on, Ron. So obviously, you take
you.
care. Everybody
I want to
watching,
ask,
all the best.
can you please post this on Facebook?
Yep, it's on Facebook. Yep.
Okay, because John was asking me about it.
Okay.
Okay, thanks again, James.